Freedom Council is nothing without all of you. How do we go about getting people held criminally responsible for their acts? The military is still at risk. Election interference, the medicalization of childhood. These drug dealers like Pfizer and Moderna, we can seize their property. We develop our litigation through conferences like this. It's going to come through communications. It's going to come through conversations. And Freedom Council is that conversation.
For information, visit freedomcouncil.org.
I knew as early as February 2020 that I needed to do something.
I recognized that there was a systematic problem and that this was not about hydroxychloroquine, it was something larger.
Fear shut the world down, and people made a lot of money at it as they were killing us.
I was asked to speak at a freedom rally that was set up to discredit my reputation.
Whoever orchestrated this must not have the safety of this nation in mind.
Medicine and politics should be separated. These doctors were handcuffed.
The American public has awakened. We have a new civil rights movement to restore our rights, and we're going to hold them accountable.
It is a natural progression of a man of God or woman of character to see injustice, to seek it out, and then to act upon it.
Do you hear me? We will never lock down again. This is the hill we die on.
Don't miss New American Heroes with attorney Warner Mendenhall and John Davidson, Mondays on brokentruth.tv.
Of women of character. I know a woman of character named Jennifer Kennedy, and she's on our show today, Warner. Hi, Jennifer.
Hey, everybody. Hi, John. Hi, Warner. Great to be
Warner,
here.
can you kind of guide us into some of Jennifer's cases? Because I know I'll butcher it.
Well, no, we're going to let Jennifer guide us through her cases. But, Jennifer has really been a warrior in a number of areas that have been of great importance, I think, to the public here in the United States, and has been just a leading attorney. And she just argued a great appellate argument. And let's talk about the scope of your practice. And you actually got activated again because of the COVID crisis, correct?
That's right. I'm a civil litigator, and my early practice was defense litigation, and I stopped fraud in the insurance industry. So I was in insurance defense and was really happy to be able to defend brokers and carriers and insureds, people just like you, from fraudulent claims against their policies or fraudulent bad faith actions. And that felt really good. But I had 3 kids and I decided to shift my practice. And around, pre-COVID, I was generally just picking and choosing and doing whatever small projects I wanted to work on that worked with being a working mom. And then I would say I was activated as an activist and getting into politics in 2015, when the state of California took away our parents' rights to opt out of the childhood vaccination schedule. And I learned of this by accident because I had my 3rd child going into kindergarten, and suddenly I needed to look back at what do we do to enroll my child? And I learned at that time they had taken away the personal beliefs exemption, which I had used for my other kids because I was an early delayer and denier on the childhood vaccinations. I had read a lot of information while pregnant, and I was not going to inject my babies, my tiny newborns. So I find out in 2016 that they've taken that away. And overnight, I became a health freedom activist because that was alarming to me. And I tried to alert my fellow parents. And that's what got me into learning about actually vaccine education, learning about the side effects and the injury and the death, and the fact that injury and death from any vaccine is real and not rare. And I got very involved out here in California with that. So that was my background. And at that time in 2016, it was a lot of the crunchy moms. It was definitely the alternative and crunchy moms who were focused on the fact that children were going to be excluded from school. because of SB 277, which was the law taking away our personal beliefs. And I will tell you, the mainstream did not really care. Most other families at my school didn't care. Nobody was noticing. And we were beating the drums at that time. You guys, we're going to see adult mandates coming. If they try this on our kids, we're going to see adult mandates. Well, never thought it would happen as fast as it did. So when COVID came out and the pandemic was rolled out, I was primed to be looking for a vaccine or an answer and then waiting to see the mandates happen, which of course they did. And that's what really got me into the COVID mandate movement, the legal movement against it, was when in Los Angeles Unified, they came in with a kids mandate. And I'm like, don't come for the kids. You cannot come for our children, because the state of California, as any state, is the entity that sets vaccinations for school entry, not individual schools, not charters, not anybody. And yet that's what they were trying to do. So I jumped in, joining ranks when helping Nicole Pearson, who's one of our fellow freedom counselors, because she was fighting that mandate. And that was great experience and also extremely eye-opening. We felt we could just run in and tell the court all about how they were trying to force these vaccinations on our kids, these experimental products on our kids, merely to keep them in school. They were holding these kids hostage with that COVID shot. This was appalling. And unfortunately, in 2021, the judges didn't care. They did not see the exclusion of kids, of healthy kids from school, as a problem. They granted no emergency relief. We were in there on temporary restraining orders. Nothing was granted. And they eventually let the entire fall semester go by and the entire spring semester go by, where my Granada Hills charter students were actually kicked out of school. And only in July of 2022 did LA Unified finally get hit with the ruling that, yes, indeed, like we said back in October of 2021, your mandate was illegal. You have no power. Only the state has the power to do this, and they didn't do it. So your entire kids' mandate was illegal. That's really where I jumped completely into mandate litigation. But I'm blabbing. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And then I shifted to the adults.
Yeah, well, LAUSD is really an interesting story, though. And one of the things that has been striking is the behavior of their lawyers, the lawyers on the other side. And I don't know how much you want to talk about that, but some of this is in the public record. So if we would keep it to what's in the public record, maybe, what have you seen and what has the court observed by the defense attorneys?
Well, interestingly, what I can talk about that's in the public record is the fact that in the Health Freedom Defense Fund case, Health Freedom Defense Fund versus Carvalho is the case brought by Health Freedom Defense Fund and Leslie Manukian. And this was an early challenge to the LA Unified adult mandate. And what happened there was it got a dismissal in the lower court on the pleadings, a judgment on the pleadings, which is really early in litigation and very rare. It basically says you got nothing. You have no cause of action whatsoever. And that went up to the Court of Appeal, the Ninth Circuit. And in that case, Health Freedom carefully laid out the fact that, or the allegations that this COVID injection, this injection of spike protein factory making mRNA, is not in fact a traditional vaccine. It is a gene therapy. It is a mere medical treatment because it doesn't prevent infection or transmission. It cannot be argued to stop the spread, right? And the old, 100-plus-year-old precedent of Jacobson v. Massachusetts is based on the premise of stopping the spread of contagious disease. Jacobson is what was used to then dismiss the case, saying, Jacobson says we got the police power to require these vaccinations. Your case is dismissed. But the argument to the Ninth Circuit was, no. We've alleged this isn't a vaccine. It is therefore not subject to that really low standard in Jacobson of rational basis. Do you have a rational basis for requiring this injection in people? Really, it needs to be strict scrutiny, needs to be a compelling interest. Why does this employer have the right to demand that you take a medical treatment?
Yeah,
What's
let's,
the compelling interest? So anyway.
yeah, let's put a little point on that. I mean, people need to understand rational basis is the easiest standard for government action to be approved under. And it's almost any basis, as long as they have some basis.
Right.
Even the use of the word rational, you don't, I'd frequently look at stuff and we're fighting on a rational, if you're fighting on a rational basis theory, you find the courts are like, well, can they say the words almost? You're not really examining the rationality of it, unfortunately. But strict scrutiny is the opposite end and deals with our constitutional rights. And that does involve a greater investigation of why, a scrutiny as to why the government regulation was put into place. I just want the audience to be aware of those differences. Rational basis, almost anything goes. Strict scrutiny, at least you're going to get a review.
Yes. Thank you, Warner. That's awesome. And that is, in fact, what they argued. This was not my case. This was Scott Street and John Howard in the Ninth Circuit arguing masterfully, writing masterfully that, listen, if we allege that this is not a vaccine, which is given this rational basis review, and we say it's a medical treatment and you've got to have this much higher review, then the court was wrong. The court below was wrong to dismiss our case. And the Ninth Circuit agreed. And they reversed that dismissal and sent it back to the trial court, which meant it was live once again. Now, here's where the defense counsel there for LAUSD, this is where it gets funny, and it shows how personalities actually affect litigation. Because when they were clearly winning, this Ninth Circuit argument was in September of 2023, and they were clearly winning because the judges were shocked to hear from defense counsel that, yeah, the mandate was still up. In 2023, it was still up. They were still demanding that current and future employees subject themselves to this mandate. And one of the judges said, wait, you're telling me that somebody who got this shot back in 2021 is considered fully vaccinated? We all know it waned. But someone in 2023, they have to get it too. What about the other guy who didn't have it? They were shocked that the mandate was still in place, and really put counsel through the ringer in that oral argument. When oral argument was over, she turned, and this is in the record, she turned and walked past John Howard and leaned over and said, "What are you going to do when we take the mandate down?" And right there, that meant, oh yeah, big deal. We're just going to moot it. We're going to end the bad behavior. And there goes your appeal. That was the implication there.
Yeah,
well,
they just play games like that.
Yes.
So anyway, what happened with that?
Well, that's what they did.
Yeah, go ahead.
The case came back down with that reversal, but they did 2 weeks later, they actually removed that mandate, right? They ended it suddenly because of that. And I had some choice words in public comment that day about like, why now? It was because of those arguments. They did take it down. And then the appellate court, the Ninth Circuit, did rule in the favor of health freedom that the case lives. Okay. That was actually after they took the mandate down. LAUSD couldn't let it rest. And they filed for an en banc review, which is, of course, the review of the much larger number of Ninth Circuit judges to basically reconsider what the 3-judge panel had done. That's rare to grant, but they granted it. And they heard Ninth Circuit, and this was, I think it was 15 judges, reheard the arguments about why the case should live, why it should survive and get back on the trial track. And that argument was amazing. Scott Street did an amazing job. And I think all signs, I'm going to say it out loud, I think all signs point to an affirmance of the 3-judge panel, meaning an affirmance of sending the case back to litigation. But we have not gotten that ruling yet.
Jeez.
We haven't seen it yet. Yeah.
And, I don't know if you have a link to his arguments handy easily, but I'd love to post those for the audience.
I don't have one handy.
Maybe I'll look and see if I can find it because.
Oh, yeah.
No, he did a marvelous job.
It was a masterclass.
And just to explain again, initially when you file an appeal to one of these federal circuit courts of appeals, you have a 3-judge panel that hears it and makes a decision. But there is a right for either party that's on the losing end of that decision to ask for what's called an en banc review, which means every available judge will basically come in and hear the argument. And that is really going to create strong precedent if they all agree with it after an en banc review. So it's very important. And you were at the Ninth Circuit as well.
I was.
So the LAUSD is still pending. Tell us about your case at the Ninth. You did a marvelous argument too. I'd like to find that.
Thank you. That was so many thanks to Freedom Counsel for prepping me for that. And we did a mock run through and then debriefed it. That was so helpful. This was my first appeal ever of any kind, state court or federal. The case is Peterson versus Snohomish Regional Fire and Rescue. It's the case of 8 firefighters who had religious objection to the COVID vaccine. They submitted their request for accommodation and they weren't accommodated in the slightest. And in fact, at the very last minute of the deadline by their department for vaccination, they were put on unpaid suspension. And the department worked behind the scenes with the union to make it look like this unpaid suspension was in fact this benevolent leave, a personal leave time for these firefighters, these dedicated career firefighters who'd worked all the way through the pandemic safely without the shots in their body. But because there was a mandate on the books, suddenly they were viral disease vectors. So they put these guys on unpaid suspension and then And this was meant to be indefinite, right? Up to 3 years. We know this was coercive. It was meant to be forever, basically, until you change your minds. But the department, we know, realized it had kneecapped itself. The chief admitted in deposition, well, we actually really needed them. And they brought them back to the line, to their exact same duties, the exact same safety protocols, exact duties, no limitations, no restrictions, no nothing. Kind of like the old Emily Latella Saturday Night Live, never mind. And they thought that was going to fly. Well, these men and their families suffered for those 8 months of unpaid suspension, and they had to scramble for jobs, had to scramble to feed their family. And here was the kicker, like we saw in another Washington case, where they, the unvaccinated, were excluded from their station house and from working with their coworkers. But the coworkers, when they're out on mutual aid calls, were interacting with unvaccinated firefighters from all the departments surrounding them who had accommodated their people. Further, one of our lead plaintiff, David Peterson, he had to go out and get a job. Well, he got a job with Snohomish County being a fire investigator, and he would show up at the same scenes with his same coworkers working side by side, only not on the department's dime. So there was incredible arbitrariness in this decision and complete lack of rationality, and also the religious discrimination, which is the failure to accommodate. Why couldn't they accommodate their guys? They had worked all that way through the pandemic with these amazing safety protocols that the department had created, and yet suddenly at the stroke of midnight on October 18th, suddenly they transmogrified into dangerous disease vectors. That's the case. So they sued, and with a different attorney, they lost at summary judgment. And as you know, summary judgment is where you've gone through discovery, you have all kinds of evidence, you now put it in front of the judge, and you ask the judge, hey, judge, listen, the evidence totally shows that for the defendants, that our defense prevails. There is nothing, there's no issue of fact that a fact finder, the jury, needs to hear. You can just call it right now and kick this and grant summary judgment, which means take away their right to trial. They lost at summary judgment. They lost their right to trial. Now, again, this is Washington. I'm in California. What am I doing representing these guys? I was following lead plaintiff's wife is super active on Instagram at Mrs. Lauren Marie. And I follow all the cops and fire cases across the nation. And I could see, I'm like, oh my gosh, they lost at summary judgment. Who's going to appeal this? And I did not see any appeal happening. So I contacted Lauren and said, "What's happening up there?" She's like, "We don't have anybody to appeal." Again, I've never done an appeal in my life. And I'm like, if no one does it, if you don't get anybody to come in, I'll come in, I'll file that notice of appeal. And then we'll get a foot in the door in the Ninth Circuit and we'll see what we do next. What happened? I took the case.
I think we have a special guest going to join us. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm glad that you guys have patience with this judicial system.
Is it
or
Brook?
legal
Is she
system.
on?
Yeah, because when you talk about all the wizard spells that you guys have to cast just to present the horrors that have been occurring to a judge, that's a nightmare, and nobody knows that nightmare like Brook Jackson, who's in the room now with us. Hey, Brook Jackson.
Hey,
with
Brook.
messy hair, no makeup, and I really don't care.
Me either, girl. It's okay.
And I'm on my porch. So
hi, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm great, Brooke. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Hey, Warner.
Hey there.
And you guys, I know this is supposed to be. This is Brooke. This is your show.
No. I mean, I loved just hearing your little what I was able to kind of come in on. It has been a wild ride for me, I'm sure, and. One of the things I think we need to do is keep talking about it because, we reach new people every day, people that don't know.
That's right.
So it's important.
One of the things that I'd like to say, Jennifer, started talking about when her litigation began. These cases, some have been pending since 2020, 2021. We are still deep in the fight. 4 or 5 years later, 4 or 5 years down the line. And one of the issues with that is that the defense is essentially exhausting. Plaintiffs don't have institutional funds or corporate funds for these lawsuits. And we've experienced this among our freedom counselors. It's a very hard road to go down, and Brooke, you certainly have been down it. And Brooke, you've given, I don't know, hundreds of interviews, I think, but one of the things that I'd like to focus on is a little different than your story that you traditionally tell. And for anyone who doesn't know, Brooke was a clinical trial manager with Ventavia, which is a clinical trial group that was subcontracted under a subcontractor of a subcontractor to Pfizer to run the clinical trial. And what Brook saw, which many of you know, is, problems with the data, which have only become more and more clear. But one of the things that I'm interested in, Brook, is, if, to the extent you're willing to talk about it, this has come at great personal sacrifice to you. And, I'm sure, and I get, as a whistleblower, I'm a whistleblower attorney, but as a whistleblower, I guess I'd like to talk to you about, how that's felt to you. What, like on day one, I know you probably expected that, you saw this terrible behavior, that it would get corrected by our officials. So let's start with day one, just how you felt about it and how you felt, how you felt treated by our government, even by the attorneys for that matter. Whatever.
I guess it depends on the day and the mood, Warner, because you and I, we've kind of talked about this before, and John and I, spoke about this last night, and I'm in a pretty good mood today. So I guess I'll try to tell you as positively as I can. I still have faith in the judiciary and the judicial system and justice, and that, we're going to see some accountability at some point. I don't know when that's going to happen, and I certainly expected it a lot sooner. But Warner, you have cases, I know, that have gone on for decades or more. And I thought when I filed this lawsuit that it was so important that Pfizer and the FDA know about the problems that I was seeing in their clinical trial. I thought that they would want to hear them, and whatever their reasons were, they just were not interested in correcting the issues. And, I just felt this ethical obligation and responsibility to file this lawsuit. I knew that they were funding their experiment on our, using our taxpayer dollars. So if their product was approved based on falsified and fabricated data, I wanted a refund for the American people.
Yeah.
Period. And I saw how quickly investigations can spin up in Washington. And I thought, again, for sure, this is going to be one of those investigations that open and ends quickly. And that was surely a surprise when, instead of investigating and, holding Pfizer responsible for fraudulent clinical trials, they just kicked the can down the road. And that was truly a shock, and still is. I will always encourage people to come forward if they have information, but looking back, 5 years, I don't know that I necessarily would have filed this particular lawsuit. I would have tried to, I'm a person that likes to think outside of the box, and maybe we could have found a different pathway. I don't know, but it's been shocking and heartbreaking and a million other emotions.
It leads for me a crisis of confidence in the systems that we thought were there. Like I thought when COVID started, like, okay, bad things are happening. I know that there's a lot of corruption in this country, and everybody's running a scam half the time. But I thought that, in a crutch moment, that people would do the right thing, that they would step up and not be afraid, because this was either a biological attack or some sort of disaster that we need to shield ourselves from. But instead of that, it was like the scams went into overdrive, and it was like traditional scams, but now on crack cocaine. And so our judiciary, like it really caused me to scrutinize, and this is why part of why we have the show, like to scrutinize the legal system, the judiciary, the political class, the government agencies that oversee medical industries, and it's exposed this really, really nasty, soggy log that we've lifted up, and now it's just nothing but roaches and rats and snakes. And how do we fix it? I mean, I'm glad that you did what you did, but I get it, man. I'm sort of over it too, and it's amazing to me that Warner and Jennifer can wake up every day and be as perpetually positive as they are, and bright lights in this massive darkness. Go.
It's made me love the law, right? I mean, I love what you guys do, but I tell Warner all the time, I don't know how you continue to do it when, right. Depending on the political climate, it determines the outcome of your case. Mm-hmm. And that just is, it's shocking, but I'm not surprised.
It is shocking. And I want to piggyback on that, finding out, for example, again, very naive in early COVID when they were hitting the kids with a mandate. And 2 of our charter schools out here were trying to mandate it. They did mandate it for their kids, and they were excluding the kids from school. And on the first day of school, they were, of course, Granada Hills Charter and New West Charter. And on the first day of school, New West went viral at this time for some of the girls who were unvaccinated. They were led to believe that they had filed a medical exemption, and while it was pending, they would, of course, be allowed to go to school while that exemption request was pending. They showed up in good faith to start school. These are freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors. And they were held back out of school. They were roped off with yellow police tape in front of the school. The principal literally treated them like lepers that they had to be shielded from. They were blocked entry to the school. It was so dramatic and awful. And so they called the police. Well, actually, the principal called the police on them. And the police were supposed to come and escort them. Well, this was awful, right? Absolutely terrible. Very soon thereafter, there was a motion. They had an attorney at the time, and they ran into Santa Monica Superior Court to get a TRO, a temporary restraining order, to say, stop this exclusion of these girls from school and look at what they just did to them. Look at this appalling treatment of children. And the woman judge couldn't care less. She just didn't care. I was there. I was the only attorney sitting in the gallery that day. And she was like, she had no idea that this was awful, terrible behavior. And she's like, I don't even think I'm going to grant this, they blah, blah, blah. And she goes, and by the way, this sounds an awful lot like the LA case. I think we need to combine it with the LA case.
Oh.
And the girls' counsel said, Your Honor, we're here on an emergency motion. We want our relief today. And she goes, well, I guess you better hurry up and get down to LA. That was shocking.
Yeah.
As an attorney, I've never, ever seen the indifference and the dismissiveness by the judges to clear suffering by kids. Awful. That was eye-opening.
I just wonder, how awful for them, right, to have to experience that. But I wonder if having gone through that experience breaks the cycle for them, whatever that means. Because for me, and everything that I've been through and everything I've learned from, our medicines and how, depending on who you are and who's in office and, what the product is, fraud can have everything to do with the approval process. It doesn't matter if the product is safe or effective. There's all these other things that matter, to what we put in our foods, to what we're teaching our children in school. I mean, COVID opened like this box for me that, it's been a huge learning experience for me. And I know for my children and my family specifically, I broke the cycle. So everything that I learn, they learn, right? We're putting up a new garden, we're growing our own food, we're sourcing, local farmers for our produce and, our meats and our vegetables, some, and, milk. I mean, we're doing everything different than we did in 2020. And so for them, I'm hopeful for their future, their education. I'm in Texas, so we do have to get exemptions from vaccinations and, all that dumb stuff. But do it. I mean, it's a form and a notary and a little bit of our time. And that's what protects them from that. And then just keep our eye on what's going on in school and have, hopefully fostered an open kind of, relationship with them and how they learn and what they learn, and they talk to us. So I don't know, but then you got to think about the people that have truly been harmed, right? Because I've been harmed, I guess.
Right.
But not,
for sure. Not, I guess. Absolutely, you have.
The people who've actually have lost their health or lost a loved one. Like I don't know how they serve, how they just keep going.
I have plenty of my clients are vax injured. And it's devastating. There's just no way around it. I've got all kinds of Los Angeles City employees, fire, cops, every civilian department, the teachers, obviously the teachers in the LA Unified, and then people in LA County. And I have so many sad, horrific stories of loss and damage and incalculable, catastrophic damage to people's lives and their livelihoods and their families, et cetera.
Well, thank you for listening to them.
What do you guys? What do you guys think is behind? We've covered a lot of this, the Shotsgate stuff. The doctor in Houston that was against the MAGA people. She was also part of this Shotsgate group. The doctors, the politicians, the ones that go online and they toe this gaslighting stance about vaccine injuries. Which should concern every medical doctor, but instead is like this polarizing thing. What do you think is behind some of that? I mean, I look at doctors attacking other doctors that speak out, and it's just so strange to me. What do you think is behind that?
There's always money. I always think there's money. Of course, we can use the big pharma as the boogeyman. There's always money behind it. There's some incentive behind the scenes for this blind allegiance, this religion of vaccinations of all kinds. And there's also truly, I think, just so much ignorance We saw that from the opposing senator when Senator Ron Johnson just had that recent hearing about vax injury of all kind. And then the opposing senator was just parroting all of the things we know are not true. But he seemed to believe them. People still, I call this the butt polio crowd, but polio. They're focused on that what they learned back in the past was that vaccines are God's gift to mankind or something, and they can't let go of it. They just can't. There's something to do with that willful ignorance, but I don't know why they don't listen to the information we have to provide and change their mindset.
It's $1 million question, John.
I mean, there may be $1 million behind it.
That's right.
Billions.
There's a lot more than that.
Right.
It's just,
it's money, it's control, it's power. We all know that the whole, again, getting into the vaccine passport, the control of the population. Let's see what they will do. Let's see how hard they push back or if they don't. And sadly, so many did not push back.
I just wonder why we don't push back harder.
Too many people were scared. They were truly scared. They were gulled by all of that fear mongering about COVID itself, and they couldn't see their way through it.
But the ones that are aware, Jennifer, like you know, I mean, I feel like there are enough of us in whatever movement you want to call it, you know, medical freedom, whatever you're gonna call us. But there are enough of us. I asked John this question last night, and I don't understand why we continue to allow this to happen. Why everybody gets so upset. And of course, I don't even like thinking about it, talking about it. But the Epstein files and what, you know, these people are accused of doing to our children. Well, look what Big Pharma is doing to our children. Why is one okay? Kind of, you might like, you know.
Same. Yeah. And in the gender world, in Title IX, we've been arguing about stop with the transgender nonsense, stop with undercutting parents' rights, and stop injuring vulnerable kids for years, certainly in California. But only really when it hit the female athletes did it become visible and tangible to a much wider population. It's like, why didn't it matter before when we're just talking about kids being disadvantaged and taken advantage of and harmed? But suddenly when it's female athletes, which is great. I am so glad to see the movement in that area, but it is a wonder. Why isn't everyone already up in arms about that particular attack on our kids, all kids? It's, you know what? Is it the normalcy bias? I call this normalcy bias. People want to live their normal lives. They want to go about their normal, regular lives and not have to think about, is there some larger force that's against me? Is there a larger force that is also intended to disrupt my life and I should really be thinking about? And people don't want to think about it, really, and spend their lives fighting. They just want to, you know, the pursuit of happiness, which is fine. Life, liberty, and happiness. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
This Obama scandal has identified, I think, one part of the problem, which was the news media has been hijacked and taken over. Yep. And how did that happen? You know, I think you had cancel culture that would go after anyone that advertised on a platform that reported something that was negative to Obama. Then you'd had journalists inside embedded that were putting out propaganda, hit pieces, whichever direction that they needed to push to support this intelligence agency disinformation. And then you lose your advertisers. And once you lose your advertisers, then the networks swing the way that the money's coming. And that's why everything's pharma based now. And they can't report it because that's where a big chunk of their money comes from. Yeah. And so
my favorite kind of just compilation of videos was the one about Pfizer. And at the very end, it says something like the royal wedding brought to you by Pfizer. I was like, wow, they have their hooks in everything, don't they?
Everything.
Yeah. We have to get, you know, I was asked this morning by a businessman, how can I help you? And I'm like, you know what? We have to get advertisers back. We have to get American-based advertisers to start advertising with independent media and even major media, because it's going to bring them back towards the center, hopefully. But, you know, it's interesting now that the USAID money is gone. That I think a lot of that money was used to astroturf local news stations and local newspapers across the country that seemed like they were actually local, but what they really were DNC puppets pretending to be newspapers. And then the regular newspapers swung with them because they were the only ones getting advertisers. And it's interesting because you'll have very successful companies that don't advertise with anybody, and they think that the advertising dollar is just about a return on investment or clicks per view or whatever. But what it really is supporting the heralds of the modern age. And if they don't do it, we all suffer. And I think we've seen what happens when we don't have a robust media. And we've got bloggers and podcasters, but Charlie Kirk can't do everything.
Right.
And like I get no advertisers. The movie got no visible advertiser support when I made it, but it should be the opposite. They should be competing for placement. And how do we get the country back? I mean, it seems like the USAID stuff is happening, and maybe this is what's going on in the government right now under the new administration. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
Wow, that another $1 million question, John.
I wish that I could get paid $1 million for these questions.
Right. Right.
I have a curiosity though in Brook's case in particular, and Brook has done hundreds. I don't know how many interviews you've done, Brook, but hundreds, right?
I know, but you would think it was my first one because my armpits will not stop sweating.
Well,
I get so nervous when I do interviews. It's just gross.
You do a great job, of course.
You're a sweet girl. What was your question? I don't know how many. That's funny. John was talking about the mainstream. There's never been. There's only been one what I would consider mainstream media personality that's ever contacted me to talk about my lawsuit against Pfizer, and that was Jesse Waters on Fox. And I actually declined his interview because I feel like I was in a point with this case where I felt, I've reached out to all of the networks. I sent emails. I probably wrote letters and sent faxes. Might have even I just social media. I contacted everybody that I could think of when this case became unsealed, just to let them know, hey, Pfizer cheated in their clinical trials, and I'd like our money back, and I'd like you guys to know about this and cover it, because this isn't the first time that Pfizer's been caught, cheating and stealing taxpayer dollars. And so, but I was at a point where I knew that I'd reached out to him a year plus prior to him reaching out to me, and he ignored me for all that time. When it was, I understand, and you got to find the grace in your heart to for some people, they were afraid to lose their jobs and come forward, and yada yada yada. But I just felt like, you had an opportunity to interview me a year ago, and you chose not to, or your network chose not to. And now I'd really just like to give my time to the independent journalists who, maybe have lost their jobs due to a mandate, or, just like covering this sensitive topics. And I'd rather give my time to them. And, so I declined the interview. I kind of regret that now, because maybe I could have reached more people, but I haven't stopped talking.
And you could always reach out again.
I could, but when I think about the news, I don't know. To me, even Tucker Carlson's kind of like this. They're like funny, when I watch Tucker Carlson, I don't feel like I necessarily get the news, right? Like, he's almost like a comedian to me. When he laughs in his little goofy laugh, it cracks me up. So I can't even take him seriously most of the time. So I don't know. I don't go to the mainstream media for my news, but I used to. As a business mom, I had to come home and get the kids and homework and dinner and laundry and be a wife, and then get to practice. And so I get that there are still people out there that don't know what's going on.
Absolutely. And that's why this show, I think, is going to be great if we can continue to focus on your case, all the various cases that are happening, because I think many people who have moved on from COVID, it's over for them. Pandemic is over. They're not really thinking about it. And then those who remain injured, the true vax injured, as well as the people who suffered under the mandates, they're like, hey, what about us? We are still, I mean, I was just talking to my friend who's a police officer fired, Jonathan Cruz, fired by the city of Hermosa Beach for no good reason after his religious exemption was denied. Why? Because he wasn't religious enough. That's what city of Hermosa Beach said. They pulled this veteran, he's a U.S. Marine and a longtime police officer, and they pulled him out of his job. He is still suffering. You cannot just lateral into another law enforcement job. And so there's a lot of quiet desperation going on still in this undercurrent. And then we litigators are out here under the surface, paddling furiously with all these cases. But we need more eyes on the fact that this battle is still going on. You keep hearing the past tense talking about, well, back in COVID, this is what was happening and this is what they did back then. It's like, it's still going on. We see it in the decisions by our judges. You still see, why am I still arguing in court that we shouldn't hold jobs or educations hostage to an irreversible invasive medical procedure? Why is that even a thing anymore? Why are we arguing these tiny ticky-tack things about did you get notice or did you blah, blah, legal facts, whatever? Why? There should be, and here's the thing. Some people are getting justice and some are not. And it's depending upon maybe the attorney. It's depending upon maybe a deadline they missed. It's depending upon their own knowledge. That is so inconsistent. Everyone suffered across the board. There needs to be a blanket statement that, yeah, this is wrong. Totally wrong. All of it was wrong.
Yeah, I think in our litigation, I mean, we see that just among our clients, some are able to be successful. It just depends on the judge and the situation. And then others, you're doing an identical argument and you're losing. So it is very, very frustrating. And Brook's case, I mean, right now we are at a key point in the case. And, one of the most disappointing things for me right now is the administration needs to change its position. It has not changed.
On paper.
On paper, it is the same position the Biden administration took in Brook's case.
Warner, back up for a second. Tell the readers again, Brook is the Pfizer whistleblower, and the case is for accountability, but tell us where it is.
It's a simple case in a sense. I mean, there was the data underlying all the mandates, everything we're doing is unreliable data. There were biases in the data. There was biases in the analysis. I mean, I can go into tons of different details that show that, but there's been some great people who have helped review that data and show us where those are. I mean, I'm no scientist, I'm no statistician, but there's just some remarkable work that's been done. And I'm going to say this, I'll get back to the case in a minute, but I do want to make this point since I'm on this. One of the things that Brook did by standing up is that she attracted many, many, many people who were curious about the case and then went on to independently and pro bono for free, did research and spent thousands of hours digging in to find out what the core truths were. And so I think that, Brook standing up, helped to attract people to it, helped get some analysis done that would not have happened unless she had stood up. But that said, I think all of that research has proven her case over and over and again in many, many different ways now, and is now available to us and is available to the federal government, even more than it was on day one. Yet this case, the federal government opposed us at the district court level and got the case dismissed. And now we're on appeal at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And the appellee is the U.S. federal government that we're having to fight to get recognition for this case and this cause of action. And it's the same argument, like I said, under the old DOJ as the new DOJ. And I literally don't understand it. Technically speaking, and the way the Department of Justice thinks about this is their client is HHS. Their client is Bobby Kennedy. And, I really wish I knew what the conversations were like in the background, because I know Bobby knows about the clinical trial fraud. I know he knows this is a problem. Why isn't he instructing his lawyers to correct this? And it should be done immediately. Change the position. Give us a chance to reveal what happened in these clinical trials.
Warner, will you remind the audience what the reasons are that they're seeking to dismiss the case?
Well, the simplest one is that, that this case is actually contrary to the public health policy of the United States.
So the allegations are about clinical trial fraud. This isn't a vaccine war, okay? It's not vaccines are good, vaccines are bad.
Right.
This is fraud going to be allowed near our drug approval process? Yes or no? Because we've proven that. And the DOJ, go ahead, Warner, sorry.
Well, the DOJ is basically allowing clinical trial fraud to continue in this case unaddressed. I think that's a great point, Brook. Let's get away from vaccines altogether. Let's look at clinical trials. And it's not just this one, by the way. I mean, the clinical trial process is in our country, I hate to say it, completely deteriorated and is in real trouble. And anything that's coming out now, I mean, I'm going to be looking sideways at every clinical trial that comes out from here on out.
Right.
And I will say this, and I was aware of this at the time, the Department of Justice pre-COVID actually came out and had an initiative to correct problems in clinical trials. In 2019, they announced it. Yet here Brook brings a clinical trial that's fraudulent, that needs to be addressed, and there's crickets.
But the reasons, Warner, it's against national health policy to support me as a whistleblower.
Yeah.
There was 3 others. We cannot burden HHS, so it would be a burden to bring a case against Pfizer, FDA. So everybody under the umbrella of HHS can't be bothered. It would be too expensive. And there was one other, I can't remember, just things that make you scratch your head. You're like, what?
You're doing a better job than me, Brook.
No, I mean, just because I'm just a lay person, I don't know anything about the law really, other than what I've learned over the last few years, having to, look at, try to understand what Warner's writing.
The other thing that they really have advocated is actually an unfettered right to dismiss a case, meaning they really don't have to give the judge or the court or the public any reason whatsoever to dismiss a case. They don't have to have a rationale. We don't have to have an evidentiary hearing. If they say it gets dismissed, we don't get to inquire whether, let's go full circle here, whether the dismissal's rational or not. And then, and then Brook has rights that we're trying to vindicate as well. I mean, she has a right to petition her government. She has a First Amendment right. And there is a component of this case. Brook was wrongfully fired. So that component is in this case as well, all of it on appeal right now. So I'm always hopeful. I think that the case itself has been very revealing in many, many, many ways, and has helped people to resist these mandates and resist these shots and gain a better understanding. And I think one of the core issues that Brook's case made front and center is that this was a Department of Defense project. It's not a public health project.
That's right.
It's a Department of Defense countermeasures, project. And that's barely penetrating the public right now. But it's out there, it's in the case, it's on paper. That's what they told us it is. And they are not going to, they're going to defend the DOD here in its decision making. So I think those are deep areas of research for people, but let's understand right now, this wasn't our public health infrastructure This was our DOD countermeasures, and countermeasures are to a biological attack. To go a little deeper. So where did they get their power? They get their power because of biological attack. That's what triggers their ability to do this as the Department of Defense. That's not the narrative you're hearing in the mainstream media. Where'd the biological attack come from? Who was behind it? How did it get developed? Why did you decide it was a biological attack? Why do we need countermeasures?
So Warner, just so I can clarify what you were saying, you were saying that Brook Jackson's case firmly established that the United States government behaved in a way that shows it was attacked by a biological weapon?
Yep.
Therefore, we are no longer in the debate on whether it was a natural origin or not. We are firmly entrenched in this was a biological attack on the United States of America.
This is the biodefense world, and they are not clear about that.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't been from the beginning. And I think they should, my view is our public can take it, but you've got to level with them. You got to give them the facts. You got to tell them what's happening and where do these powers come from. And anyone who looks at where the powers to do what was done comes from goes right back to Department of Defense.
Which, now this leads back into, if this was a biological attack, is it possible that all of the censorship and all of the what we perceive to be political was actually a smokescreen for media control initiated by a Department of Defense response to a biological attack? In which case, an attack from whom or by whom?
Well,
and what was the weapon?
Another
do we think it was COVID or something else?
And is the killer inside the house?
Yeah.
Is it ongoing? What are the rules according to the DOD's biological defense system for declaring the end of the attack?
There's no book of secrets anywhere, John. They're made up as they go.
But do you know what I mean? Like if this is DOD and the protocol that they've established is that this is how they behave during a biological attack, what is that protocol? How does it declare an end? When do we know it's over?
Well, I mean, it is.
Event 201, tell us.
What's that?
Event 201, wasn't that like the
precursor, the practice?
Yeah. So doesn't it have an ending? I don't know.
Isn't there a manual? Surely that's maybe it's in the index.
And everyone should look at Event 201 and what happened there. I mean, they did plan for how to deal with the news media. It's
I actually think that we should, and I'm not even really kidding, that we should get sheriffs across the nation and we should war game Event 420. Which is the rounding up of media officials who participated in the lie, the doctors that were doing this evil research, the billionaire sponsors of the mandates, and all the people that worked against the United States and our freedoms. I would like to see a simulation where we actively review on how do you begin mass arrests of people. For example, let's say you are a wealthy billionaire, unnamed, in a city like, I don't know, Seattle. If you were going to raid a, say, 1,000-acre estate owned by a random, completely, just pie in the sky, I'm just throwing out ideas. Let's say the name is Will.
Right.
Let's say that person was being arrested. You'd want to war game out exactly what kind of defense systems that person would have. Would they try to flee? Would they try to get out on a helicopter? I'm certain that all these billionaires have significant amounts of security protocol in place. So we need to be anticipating what kind of defenses they're going to have so that our sheriffs know how to be prepared.
Well, you played that clip, the Freedom Council clip. I'm very serious about that. I mean, in the sense that, crimes have occurred in this process, literally crimes. And if you address them as crimes, you can seize assets just like you do for a drug dealer. So you can seize assets of the participants in the conspiracy and the crime. And that would be a great thing to do, because I do view some of the people who are involved in this as having accumulated wealth and power, and they've misused it in a way that is an attack on the United States. So I do think we ought to think along those lines. And we have what's happened. I mean, we've all seen these casualties, and in the labor statistics, we see 3 million casualties of additional disabled on our labor statistics. Ed Dowd talks about that all the time. And then, among the injured, we all hear about the injured every day and know many of the injured. And those are, their stories are terrible. And then the dead, every day we hear about people dying unexpectedly now. That, I never heard of young people keeling over at night in bed, dead the next day. And yet I've got lots of examples now. I mean, that would be such a rare event. You'd have it go to the coroner to see, why did a 40-year-old man die in his sleep? And they're not going to the coroner anymore. They're just getting shipped to the morgue and then buried or cremated.
Yeah, I can confirm that. 2021, I submitted a FOIA request for all of the autopsies in the state of Georgia from October 2019 to October 2021. And the results showed that of all the COVID deaths, thousands of COVID deaths in the state of Georgia, the first 2 years of COVID, they did, I think, 26 autopsies on COVID deaths. The protocol in a pandemic was supposed to be, you conducted autopsies, especially if a person died at home without a physician present. But in a pandemic environment, you do the autopsies to confirm that it was, an actual pandemic that killed a person versus, say, an allergy to bullets. Which, by the way, when you do start investigating coroner files and autopsies, you realize, like, wow, the real pandemic here are drug overdoses and violent gun deaths. There's, at least in Georgia, over and over and over again, people are just being shot and murdered in the most horrific ways, and then overdosing, every kind of imaginable overdose. It's a real shame what's happened to this country.
That's why I just stay in my backyard.
That's why we have the normalcy bias.
I don't go anywhere
want to
anymore.
think about the things that we need to think about on a day. Warner, you mentioned the word crime, and I know that many of our listeners, it comes to mind that this whole bioweapon, all of it, was a crime against humanity. That's what we saw with the pushing of these shots and the force, the coercion that made many, many people have to take it when they thought they didn't. And I want to also emphasize the fact that here's the crime, that this was always an EUA, an emergency use authorized product, which meant that it was classified as an investigational drug, not licensed for any legal indication, including not licensed for use as a vaccine. Under our federal statute, the EUA statute says you must always have voluntary participation. You can never attach a penalty. And so every mandator that attached a penalty to your right to say no to the shot, every person and entity who did that was really usurping the authority of the federal government, the HHS secretary. And every judge who dismisses a case is basically condoning that undermining of the HHS, and the judiciary is undermining our executive branch. That's another thing that is
That's a great point.
an percolating undercurrent under all these cases, is that everyone always had the right to just say no.
And shame on the DOD and the military, because they knew better, right, based on the anthrax case that was brought so many years ago. They knew better. They knew not to do this, and they did it anyway. So it's like,
and they all knew better. Everyone, again, the DOD purchased every shot. And then in order to spread it to the public across the nation, you had buy-in. You had to have entities and companies and private, entities dispensing it to the public. In order to dispense it to the public, those entities receiving the shots had to promise, in offering these to the public, we will follow all federal laws and everything. We'll do it all correctly, government. And then they didn't, because they all turned around and put a penalty on it when they were just supposed to be offering it to the public and the public could say yes or no. They didn't. So they all committed fraud, really, on the government, because they promised they would do that and then they intentionally failed to do that.
And just I think about the global, regulators, the governments that are involved. I mean, it's hard to wrap my mind around that this was kind of, a joint effort, if you will.
Yeah. Sadly, it was like a worldwide effort. Yeah.
It makes you think that some of these conspiracy theories might have validity. One last thing before we leave, CHD is reporting that the American Academy of Pediatrics, our favoritist people in the world.
Heavy sarcasm.
Sarcasm filter activated.
Yeah.
They've released a policy statement advocating for the elimination of all non-medical exemptions from immunizations as a condition of school attendance.
You hear that? Hear that? They want to, you know why, John? Because they know parents have awakened across the nation. Parents are pushing back on vaccination. They want to end everyone's personal belief to say no. They're pulling to California. Right now, across the nation, there are only 5 states that basically have no functional exemption to childhood vaccination, where they hold education hostage for those shots. 5. Every other state has some form of exemption where you can opt out your child. But you hear that, see? They don't want anyone to have the ability anymore. Californians will tell you how bad this is. If their child, I've got a case right now in federal court. Child's been excluded from high school because he's non-compliant with the entirety of the vax schedule, which is filled with products that aren't they're not related to school contagion or they don't prevent the disease they claim they prevent. Right. That's what happens in California. We see it. You're stuck. You're either homeschooling or moving. But the rise, like Brook said, COVID broke open it opened people's eyes. It broke open a lot of people's, they were asleep. And now they realize they might not want to do any of these vaccinations. And that's what makes entities like the American Academy of Pediatrics scared.
And one of the things that we saw in COVID, I'd be curious, Jennifer, is the employers were only recognizing the CDC identified adverse reactions, which there are only a handful of those. And so people who had other conditions that clearly would advise you against taking a shot weren't able to get or present a medical exemption. Or if they did present a medical exemption, like I've survived cancer 3 times, and my doctor advised me not to do anything else with vaccines, that would not be accepted by the employer. So I'm curious about the children and whether they're looking at, did you have an anaphylactic reaction to a prior shot? That's the only thing you can use as a medical exemption. Was there something like that out there?
Oh, Warner, that's exactly what California did.
Oh, geez.
Because, in 2015, when then Senator Richard Pan introduced SB 277 to take away personal beliefs, he promised at that time medical exemptions will remain robust and inviolate, no problem.
But
they were unfettered discretion. But then 3 years later, they came in and took those away. And they made a list, truly, anaphylactic shock, maybe prior death or something, a tiny list, and then they witch hunt the doctors who write the exemptions.
Yeah, so literally you have to engage in the system, get a vaccine that causes the reaction before you can get the medical exemption.
Exactly. Do not take if you're allergic to the ingredients, but we're not going to tell you the ingredients ahead of time.
You're into a whole nother rabbit hole there. Yeah.
Jennifer, did you know they changed the way, not the definition of, but the, I guess, classification of anaphylaxis after COVID?
I did not know that. How did they change it? Oh,
I'll send it to you. So my child has an allergy to eggs and egg products. So we followed, our immunologist's, recommendations like to the T. And so he gave us years ago this diagram. If your child's exposed to, the allergen, you're going to check for these symptoms. If at any point he develops 2 or more of these symptoms, then you immediately dose him with, his EpiPen. And it lists a bunch of different symptoms. So if you have 2 or more, but the way they changed it was just shocking. And I'm happy to send that to you. But the way that we classify adverse events in clinical research and, what is considered a true vaccine injury is absolutely disgusting. Medicine, I thought, was always supposed to be subjective. And that's okay, but I saw a lot of things change in the way that research is handled, the way that medicine is handled, and that was just one of them. That the anaphylaxis was really shocking because we saw that in the clinical trial for Pfizer, and I think looking back at the way the trial was designed, I think we probably missed. I know that we missed a lot of those anaphylactic cases because of the way that data was being collected and the inexperience of the people that they had running these trials. So I think it's a problem.
Yeah.
Do you
Same
guys-
with changing the definition of vaccine.
Oh,
Same
absolutely.
thing. We see
I need
it.
to write myself
It's starting with that. Yeah.
So I'll send that to you.
Do you guys think that the United States military and government decided at some point that its only path for survival involved the full enslavement of the people and putting us through this situation? Is that why did the DOD declare war on Americans?
No, they just wanted every man, woman, and child to be military ready.
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? Like,
Let me
was this
give you-
some sort of a study?
Yeah, let me give you the most generous view that I've heard. The most generous view is that we're coming into a new environment where, an individual could come up with a pathogen that could really get released on a population and have a hugely harmful, rapid impact. And this is the most generous view. So the only way that we can respond to the new biological threat environment is to have a process that can really occur overnight, where you can generate a vaccine almost overnight through the computer codes, et cetera, just like they did here. And the mRNA technology gives you that ability to tweak and respond almost immediately. But, we've seen, and from a military point of view, remember, having a few million casualties for the military is not a big deal, right? They're considered casualties of war. So if we've got 3 million disabled and 1 million dead from this, well, we saved the rest of them. I'm just trying to give you the most generous, story about it that I've heard, and that also begs the question of how damaging, dangerous, and deadly, all the constituent parts of the vaccine injection are.
Right.
And we can go into that, but and the fact that it has a long history of killing the animals they were tested on as well. So they're killing us now. But that's considered the cost of war. But it's not, that's why I keep saying that's a different way of thinking about it. It's a different way of thinking about casualties. Because remember, in the 70s, the old story, the swine flu, you got 50 dead, we're pulling it.
Done.
Yeah. Done. We've got tens of thousands of acknowledged dead, and probably more like at least hundreds of thousands dead from the shot, and yet it's not pulled, it's still on the market.
Or when you look at products liability, when you have, 10 children who have the tip of their finger, snipped off because of a stroller that closes wrong, that stroller's done. It's gone, out, recalled. We'll pay you for a new one. But this, you have children who die and it's not pulled. And you have doctors still recommending it. LA County is still recommending this for pregnant women and children and saying the babies at 6 months old need to have it. LA County's website is full of fraud, if you ask me, and lies about this shot. Still.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't
Sounds like
expect
that.
anybody to start doing. Yeah, nobody's smart in LA County except for you, but not in the. I didn't expect much to begin with. Ladies and gentlemen,
right? I sorry, I know, John, you were trying to close out, but I think anytime that I feel like I'm at a point where I just don't want to do this anymore, I don't want to think about COVID. I don't want to, deal with the government anymore. Something happens. Like, I don't know what it is. I'm not a super spiritual person, but I'm always, every time that this has happened, I'm approached by somebody who's been affected, through losing their job, or someone who's lost their child, or somebody who is injured every single time. So there's no getting out of this for me, because, I just can't stop talking about it. There are people out there who've lost everything. And for me as a mother, when I've watched grown men cry, and the screams I know that we've heard from people who've lost their children, I just cannot get it. I cannot get it out of my mind. And I know that these politicians know about the problems, and so it's kind of become like a life goal. I don't know if I'll ever reach it, but I can take some kind of comfort in knowing that I stopped it for my kids, and they're not going to have to ever go through that possibility again. So
thank you, Brooke.
Yeah, I'm grateful for all of you guys.
All right, I want to close out with one thing. I'm starting to emphasize this every chance I get, but this government, whatever it thinks of Brooke's case and our work as her attorneys or whatever, they have got to acknowledge the vaccine injured and get a program in place to help them, because we know the damage has been done. We can't leave these casualties on the field suffering without any support. And I think that's where we are. I would like to, I'll close out my part with that. It's just appalling, the years that we've been talking about this, and it has not been addressed effectively at all at state or federal levels. And I'd like to see a state step up and start having some little program. And let's also get a research program. What's the damage that's been done? We need clinics and centers to study what has happened. What is this stuff doing? And that is the bare minimum that our governments ought to be doing to help the millions of people who need this help.
Agreed. They owe it to us.
Yep.
I guess I'll close mine out with that. Can y'all see that?
Yeah.
That's my little, the way that I hold my phone. And somebody actually asked me the other day when we were coming back from Florida, guys, they're like, what do you mean by that? And I just opened up a conversation, and I talked to these two guys. They were from Texas. Talked to these two guys the whole plane ride home. Mm-hmm. So they had no idea, but they had some idea. They were like, well, we got the first two, but it didn't work. We still got COVID. And I was like, yeah. So no boosters, but yeah, it opened up a conversation.
Now it was backwards. Does it say activate this?
No, it says vaccinate this. With a little
vaccinate this. I gotcha. Yeah, nice.
No, John, thank you. I appreciate the invite. I'm so sorry that I was late. I had our time zones off.
Well, no, you're good. You're good. Jennifer has graciously agreed to assist in co-hosting with John.
Awesome.
I'm not, that's very helpful. I'm not always available every Monday at 2, and I think it's, I think if Jennifer's available, or if we're both available, I think it's good to have two attorneys on here. And
yeah, when I got the text message from John that Jennifer was going to be, I was like, oh, cool. I haven't talked to her, seen her in a while. So good to talk to you.
Good to see you and talk to you again.
Warner, I look forward to our hopefully a decision in our case pretty quick, or at least the opportunity to stand in front of these judges and tell them what our government advisors have been up to for
that should be next, Brooke. I'll see you in New Orleans, hopefully.
Warner, do you have oral argument?
I don't have it on the schedule yet, but it's supposed to. We have asked for oral argument. Let's put it that way.
And the DOJ has asked that we not be given that opportunity, Jennifer.
Right.
But there is something to be said, about being able to sit across the table from the people that, are trying to destroy you. I love looking them in their eyes. So.
And there's something about them that's odd. At the hearings, it's weird, the nervousness and that they have. It's just a weird behavior on the other side. I don't even know how to describe it. You would expect them, Pfizer's attorneys, for example, to be fully confident, relaxed. They got this. They're not. They know every word out of their mouth is causing a historical record that's also causing a problem for them in the long run. That's what I think.
They know they're on the wrong side of history.
Just to confirm, the Fifth Circuit is where you said you guys are going, the Fifth Circuit Appellate?
Yes.
That is the same court that that overturned the FDA Bowden case, correct?
Yes.
Will you have those same judges?
We don't know, but it's a good court for us to be in.
Let's hope you get those judges.
Although sadly in the Fifth Circuit, that's where we got our first EUA dismissal.
Yeah.
With the 3-judge panel saying that was an FDA-approved vaccine, and who has the right to deny one anyway? So, got a Supreme Court petition on that one.
Complete unawareness of the fact.
Yes.
Well, let's hope it works out. And until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming up today. And Warner, I'll see you next Monday.
All right.
Thanks you all.
Bye, everybody.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Warner.
It's horrible what they did.
Throw people in jail without first convicting them of a crime. If you fight us, you're looking at 20 years. You just sign this piece of paper, you can go home tomorrow. I was in the next 72 hours locked in a bathroom. I was a vendor selling BitClub computer equipment that mined 92,000 Bitcoins, 500,000 Ethereum. That's $10 billion today. You take in 700 million and you pay back 10 billion. Everybody gets rich. And then you get thrown in jail for that? Right. No victims, no injured party, no one was standing to sue. The government made a terrible mistake.